We're at the biggest defence show in the Middle East. Ministers from across the world are meeting with companies to look at the latest developments in military hardware and defence. In fact, Gulf countries are amongst the biggest spenders on defence in the world. They occupy 3 of the world's top 4 spots. Saudi Arabia spends a tenth of its income on defence. Then comes Oman at 9.7%. The UAE spends 6.9% of its GDP on this sector. Compare that to 4.7%, which is what the US spends, and 2.6%, which is what the UK spends. A lot has changed since this show was last on. 2 years ago, the region was facing protests from Tunisia to Egypt, Libya to Bahrain. In fact, it was troops from here in the Gulf who were deployed to Bahrain at the request of the government to protect oil and gas facilities and financial institutions at the height of the protests in the capital, Manama. So how has this new look Middle East changed the way companies are doing business in this region?
During the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen an increasing urgency in terms of bringing solutions quickly to the region, total solutions. So we've put people in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Libya, where things are moving very, very quickly. And we see a real difference now in that there's an urgency, there's a willingness to really invest in not only hardware, but training, ongoing logistics and support. So we find that we have to be here with boots on the ground, with our employees embedded day to day with our potential customers.
Now, with heightened concerns over security across the region and new political directions in Egypt, Libya and Tunisia, how has this changed spending across the region over this period of time? Joining me to discuss this is David Reith from IHS Janes. David, how are governments spending their defence budgets these days?
Sure. What we're seeing is, in the context of the overall defense environment, even more so than 2 years ago, it's a buyer's market out there. And so as even the United States starts to reduce their defense budget, or at least the growth of that defense budget, they're seeking external markets. And the Middle East is one of those areas where we're actually still seeing rapid growth in defense budgets.
Now, there are new political realities across this region. So how are defense companies changing their behavior?
I think right now there's a bit of a sensitivity surrounding those areas. Again, these companies want to be responsible actors in the global space, and so they need to be careful about not moving too far in front of the political processes in these countries, and yet they're still in an extremely competitive environment, and so they want to make sure that they go out and grasp every opportunity out there. So there's a tension between the urgency to go out and sell their wares and to make sure they're responsible actors.
Can you talk a bit about countries that have gone through uprisings versus countries that haven't?
So they're a diverse set of countries as well. And for example, Egypt has a very strong security relationship with the United States. And in fact, the United States supplies a lot of the money to purchase those weapons. And so that doesn't change immediately. The U.S. has maintained that relationship with Egypt and has tried to use it as a part of the stabilizing relationship between those two countries. Now that's quite different from Libya, for example, that up until relatively recent times was under sanctions for the United States, and so they wouldn't deal with them in a reasonable way. And then even immediately after the sanctions were lifted, American companies knew that it would be difficult to deal with the Libyan government, that they would certainly receive a lot of scrutiny on those export efforts.
David Reith speaking to me earlier.